Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening and welcome to Repro Action's Act and Learn webinar. Our topic this month is about the elections, what just happened and what happens next. So first we'll kick off by introducing you to us, your hosts. The first voice you're hearing is me, Erin Matson. I'm based in Arlington, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C., and I'm one of the co-founders and co-directors of Repro Action.
And I am Pamela Merritt. I'm based in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm the other co-founder and co-director of Repro Action.
Great. So our agenda tonight is pretty simple. We'll introduce Repro Action. We'll do an election recap. And then we're going to have just a nice long chat with Cherisse Scott, who is founder and CEO of SisterReach, currently experiencing her anniversary of founding her organization. So congratulations, Cherisse. Talk through next steps and then leave it for Q&A. You're encouraged to put questions in the chat box at any time during the presentation, and we'll get to as many of them as possible at the end. And we encourage you to live tweet during this event. The hashtag is ReproAction. And with that, I'll introduce Repro Action. So Repro Action is a new direct action group forming to increase access to abortion and advance reproductive justice. We're extremely proud of our left flank analysis and our willingness to hold folks on all sides accountable to increasing access to abortion and advancing reproductive justice, whether they're traditionally thought of as allies or opposition. And we have a deep commitment to nonviolent direct action as one of the tools that we use to achieve our goals. And with that, I'll pass it to Pamela to talk about what just happened.
Thank you so much, Erin. So the 2016 election results, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So as we all know, Donald Trump and Mike Pence won the presidential race. It's hard to say, but that's a reality. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, and it appears that she is on path to win it by a multi-million vote margin. Both the Senate and the House will be controlled by the Republican Party, and it's important to note that these are anti-choice, anti-abortion, anti-reproductive justice majorities. The voter turnout this year was at a 20-year low. And Republicans now dominate state government with 32 legislatures and 32 governors being Republican. And again, important to note that they are anti-choice and anti-reproductive justice majorities. And that is true of my home state of Missouri, as well as many, obviously 32 home states for people all over the country. So with that kind of setup of kind of what just happened, I'm going to bring in our guest and also a member of the Repro Action Advisory Council, Cherisse Scott, who is the founder and CEO of SisterReach. Cherisse Scott has been working in the reproductive justice movement for over 10 years. In 2011, she relocated to Memphis, Tennessee, and later that year, she founded SisterReach, which is enjoying an anniversary this week. It's currently the only reproductive justice organization in the state of Tennessee. With the visionary support of her mother and grandmother, the work of SisterReach was created to focus on empowering women and girls of color, poor women, rural women, and their families. And you can find out more about SisterReach at sisterreach.org. Cherisse, welcome.
Hey, how's everyone?
Very well. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So let's go ahead and move into our conversation. I'm going to start us off with a conversation, with a question. We can kind of go from there. But my question to you, Cherisse, is were you surprised by the election results, either nationally or in your home state of Tennessee? And kind of What was your first reaction election night?
Wow. I was not surprised, as a matter of fact, and I was literally walking around my dining room table with a glass of bourbon in my hand, shaking it, shaking bourbon all over the table and the floor. Um, basically saying, I'm not surprised, and I knew that this would happen. I was not, what did you think was going to happen?
Hmm.
I think was exactly what I said, and for me, that really came from, as far as I'm concerned, there being, this growing public um, kind of split down the middle, actually, all the way around, especially when I'm thinking about, Black women. And even though Black women really showed up at the polls and basically kind of outvoted others, um, the bottom line is that even within the Black community, we were split,
Hmm.
are split, still split. Split for both, split on, the popular vote candidate, as well as, well, of course, I don't think anybody thought that, that Trump would make it this far. But I mean, by that same token, I think that we're not really being realistic with the state of our country, the state of, the culture of our country, the state of racism, the state of um, fear of a loss of power, among white people, to be, just to be frank, whatever, we want to call it. I was not surprised. I was not surprised at all. Sister Reach had been in the community canvassing 12 weeks prior to the election, but we've been out talking to community members all year. And all year we've been hearing, a lot of the same. We heard the, the kind of pushback around the Clinton candidacy. We heard the, we're not really sure, even with Sanders, and just laughter, about Trump. But by that same token, folks kind of finishing laughter with this sobering kind of, like, but he could win. This is the time of the reality TV star. This is the time, of inflammatory, quick fixes, and it seems that that our community, viewers who watch television, I mean, this is what they're used to. They're used to high drama. They're used to, you know, um, you know, the kind of Trump-esque attitude. So, I mean, I'm not saying it was a hard sell to believe that it was possible. I think the other thing that, that we're not really taking into consideration is, the constant shaming of voters, just to get out and vote. It almost was a shame, instead of a, hey, vote your best interest, vote your values, really kind of lifting up the importance of voting, as opposed to, you better get out and vote. And don't, we can't, just that whole kind of shaming, kind of tone, at least the Black voters, I would say. I felt like we got a lot of abuse. And then, like literally right before, like maybe 3 days before the election, I was like, America is really going to be shamed, for the way that it has kind of abused Black voters. When all of the dust settled, Black voters showed up.
Hmm.
We went to the polls and we voted. And even though half of us did not vote within our community, we still voted at record numbers too. So, at the end of the day, folks can say what they want, but we showed up, and unfortunately, it still was not enough.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you for that. There's a lot to unpack. And so to that to that goal, I'm going to open up the conversation and invite Aaron in. And so, Aaron, were you surprised on election night?
Pamela, I was and I wasn't. You know, I you can you know me very well. Others listening may not. There is revulsion in my voice right now. Um, I actually recently saw my niece, and she said, I remember you said a year ago that it could happen and he was a real threat. And I didn't remember telling her that, but But that is where we are. We needed to take him seriously from jump. A lot of people did not. They thought that because he said so many outrageous things, well, no one could possibly stand for that. Well, the fact is that people in this country, and particularly white people in this country, are extremely willing and ready to tolerate outright racism, xenophobia, sexism. And that's exactly what happened on election day. Even though Hillary did win the popular vote by more than 2 million votes, he still had far too many votes and, as we know, won the election. In terms of my response, I'll just say that, the night of the election itself, I remember one of the first, actually, the last thing I said before I went to sleep was I whispered out loud, "We need to be prepared to hide people." And this is one of my strongest reacts to the election, that, we need to be prepared to take bold action. And that's going to look different for different people. And some actions will be safe for some people, and some actions will be less safe for others. But we all need to do what we can to resist this and help keep our fellow human beings safe in this really scary time. And I'm curious, Pamela, just you too as well, like what your reaction was. Did you think it could happen?
Oh my goodness. So I always think that the worst case scenario can happen. You know, I've been through quite a few horrific election outcomes, and it's always possible, and particularly seems possible when folks think they've got it in the bag. So, the second that you have a group of voters who think that everything's cool, and if they're not super supercharged the way people were for Obama, then if it snows, if it's cold, if their kids homesick, then they might not turn up at the polls. So I was very nervous going in. And then the other thing that made me nervous is I'm an infamous conspiracy theorist, and I just thought it was a little too well timed that that Trump had triggered this dialogue about trusting the peaceful transition of government in the couple of weeks before the election. And I thought to myself, ooh, that feels really weird. He might be seeing something in the tea leaves that we're just not seeing. But the overwhelming thing, and I'm curious to see what Cherisse has to say. But as a Missourian, I often wade into the population that a lot of pundits have been talking about. So when people talk about Middle America, when they talk about the Midwest or the Rust Belt, there are those who talk about it in theory, and then there are those who live it in reality. And as somebody who lives in a red state, I definitely felt the reaction, both to a diversifying population, to a lot of progressive principles that were being floated around, and that a certain percent of the population felt that they were no longer on top of the pyramid, so to speak. So, and there's a sense of entitlement that comes with feeling that you deserve to be, the top consideration. And I've been feeling that for 3 years. So the fact that what we saw happen in Missouri, that we also saw happen nationally, which is that somebody with no political experience emerged to, shock people in a primary and then shock people in a general, and now has incredible control, was not at all surprising to me. What it was disappointing, but it's not at all surprising. And then also as a student of just movements, that this is typical in the cycle. Every time there's been moments of great progress and great expansion and enlightenment, there's been a backlash. And one of my favorite documentary series, Eyes on the Prize, actually has an episode that is titled backlash. And so, this is something that was predictable, a bit frustrating that people didn't anticipate it, but this is the backlash. And often, I'm the eternal optimist that often in these times of great repression, what I've liked to term 2016 election as a great regression. There are also times of great opportunity to move forward, but anytime power is challenged, it's not going to cede gently or easily. And I think that the results basically show that. And I'm just curious to see if Cherisse kind of felt the same, kind of atmospheric shifts that were going on in Tennessee in the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, the day after the election, I was still kind of in a funk. That Wednesday I went out to grab some food for my son, and I don't think that I've ever noticed groups of white people standing and laughing loudly. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, it was a real eerie feeling. To be honest, I had I had gone out a little bit earlier, and just so happened to be, where there were, maybe 5 or 6 white men kind of gathered and talking, and it was like, rah, rah. It was just loud. It was louder than I ever imagined it before, than I ever experienced it before. I even, when I went to get the dinner, I just remember, walking up, I went to the bar of this restaurant, and, there were 2 like white people sitting at the bar, and between the 2 of them were 2 chairs. So my friend and I, we were walking up, and we were going to sit there. It's the only place that we could sit, and their things were just kind of just like all over the place. And so we just kind of looked, and they were like, oh, we can move our stuff. And they were the cooks were some black men, and they were kind of cooking, and just they turned around to kind of look at the scenario that was unfolding, and it was just really odd. It was like, I don't know. Like, on the one hand, you had the one person on the right who was trying to make a whole lot of space for us, so that we would be comfortable, and the other person on the other side was just like, I don't give a hell where you sit, and it was just really weird, and I was just, and we just kind of stood there like, so it was just a very odd moment, but I think that the only thing that we all could do, well, at least us and the cooks that were cooking the food, we just kind of broke out in this like really weird nervous laughter, because it was so uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable. I can't even explain it, I think, enough. I have to be kind of physically visual for you guys to understand like how weird it was. But yeah, I mean, there was like all of a sudden this kind of weird pride, that was really huge. I remember the night that Obama won in 2008, and it was so silent. Where I was in Alabama at the time, and I remember running outside and just screaming and just like, yes, like, and I just remember like the effects of kind of how people were the next day and like the days after that, and I was like, so this is what that feels like when you feel like all of a sudden you are on top again, I guess, or when you feel like you're in control, or when you feel, and it felt like folks were feeling invincible in some way. It just felt really scary, to be honest. I never have experienced that. I'm a Detroit native. I've lived in the Rust Belt, of course, living in Detroit and in Chicago, and then, living in Tennessee, living in a red state, living in a state that has a supermajority Republican, living in a state that is almost predominantly Christian, almost, and just the energy, right? Just the energy of the moment was so thick that you could cut it with a knife. Yeah. So I just, yeah, it was scary. It was really scary. And actually, and even the days since then, it's just been a very, white people took up space before. They take up a whole lot of space right now to me. Just normal stuff, just walking through Target, you know, just going through the grocery store, just somebody reaching across you and almost daring you to say, don't you want to say excuse me? You know, we can say what we want to say, and you know, I know that there was like the kind of rhetoric that was, coming up from conservatives of talking about, while Obama was president was the worst time of race and that he got a lot of race stuff started. No, no, not at all. Actually, Obama allowed Black people to finally feel free enough to say "ouch" out loud.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But Trump, though, is a totally different ball game.
Yeah.
What you didn't see was Black people, taking up space in the way like "I dare you," or and things like friends who say that they felt inclined to go and buy a gun, and just walking into the gun store and being discriminated against because they were Black people trying to come and get a gun. These types of things are, this is the condition of the country. This is where we are. It's been a powder keg. It's finally coming to a head now.
Yeah.
And and unfortunately, I know I can't say that the president-elect is a strong enough leader to shut it down.
No.
I can't say that he is even respected enough by his own party to shut it down.
No, and then, I think I had a lot of the same reaction and a lot of the same emotions. And I, the day after the election, I kind of curled up in a ball and gave myself 30 minutes where I just felt incredibly responsible that, what I didn't do and the things that I, how far I didn't push myself, not so much for myself, but for people I know, and in particular, selfishly, for my family, because I talk quite openly about the fact that I have an older brother who has autism, and he's a Black man with a developmental disability in a city that regularly criminalizes Black people just on sight, and I had this absolute panic the morning after the election. I was like, I have no idea how our family works in this new reality. And I was, just terror. And then I, worked through it, got up, started the day. And I remember, just to share, that I went to a grocery store and it was, right on the outskirts of city versus county, and it just, I have not felt that Black and
Right.
just that different, that other, since the Los Angeles riots. I would say, just to put it into historical context, it was just, I felt very, very like eyeballed, and that there were people kind of either purposely not making eye contact or making eye contact. And I remember, rushing through my shopping and getting in the car and being super tense. And I got home and I thought to myself, so this is it, right? This is new. And then what evolved over the next few days were several conversations. Both, I've had conversations with people in the disability advocacy community. I think all of us are alarmed and horrified and concerned. And then also having conversations with, within my own circle of friends, women of color, who are just like looking at the random acts of racialized violence, and thinking to themselves, I need to be able to protect my family. And also, yeah, like, do I need to get a gun? What do I need to do to protect my family? What kind of additional advice do I have to give to people that I care about how to navigate through a state where it was already dangerous to drive while Black, and now people feel like they've got a mandate to harass and menace people. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster of emotion, but I think my first emotion is that, I'm horrified at what just took place, both its impact on people I know and love and care about, and then the broader impact on us as a society. But then I'm also like, my God, I don't think there's huge populations in the United States who have no idea what they've just like opened up the door to. Um, and I think that there's a certain naivete that people are like, oh well, it won't be that bad, and he won't be able to do this, um, and it's an incredible privilege to be that optimistic in the face of this kind of rhetoric, and as a Black woman, I've never had that privilege. Erin, you want to weigh in?
I do. I want to speak as a white woman speaking directly to white people who are on this call right now. And thank you for being here. And thank you for, I'm hoping that you've been listening and present. And I would really like to elevate the responsibility of white people at this moment in time, the moral obligation of white people at this moment in time to not allow people around you, fellow white people around you, to minimize what is happening. I'm hearing a lot of chatter and seeing a lot of chatter out there among white people that this is just talk, that it's nothing to worry about, that people are overreacting, and this is dead serious. These are people's lives on the line, and I think that I want to stress to anyone who is white and listening to this call, please work within fellow white people to advance this discussion. It's important that we make sure that Trump's voters are held accountable to what happened here, because we know that there are some people who voted for Trump who are out racist, and they're proud of that and they wear it on their sleeve. But we know that there are a number of other people who voted for Trump who believe in their own minds that they're not racist. And this is the moment where white people have a moral obligation to demand accountability to people to resist what is happening right now. All right, well, you voted for him. You need to stand up against this. You need to hold him accountable. You need to hold his followers accountable to stopping this. I'm going to be honest. I'm not optimistic about this, but everyone on this call, I believe, is activist minded, and we have a moral obligation to take action.
You're here. So that's a perfect segue, actually, I think, into kind of where I've arrived at, which is, I went through all 18 stages of grief, and just absolute horror. And then I basically kind of ended up on the other side, which is that in times of great anxiety and great oppression, and great wrong, activists are even more obligated to organize and to get people together. And part of what I take comfort in the midst of what is going to be, probably, the toughest 2 to 4 years that I've experienced since the Reagan era. But part of what I take comfort in is the fact that, the majority didn't buy in. You have like 40% of people who just didn't vote, who were eligible to vote. Some of those people were suppressed at the polls, but some of them didn't show up. And then you have, the lower voter turnout. And then when you're looking at, just the percent of people who participate in elections, which, I could bite my fingers raw just agonizing over how that's possible because I'm addicted to politics. But I get it, and it is what it is. Like, this is what we're faced with. And so now, what does resistance look like? What does our work look like? And what does accountability look like? So I'll kick it to Cherisse for the first take.
I'm sorry. And so what does accountability? What was the first word you said?
What does resistance? What does your work
right
look like right now? in like, what are you strategizing? What's changed? What hasn't changed?
Sure. So, you know, I guess for me, I can't even really move forward without, and I pulled up the statistics, the voting statistics again, and really thinking about some comments that, that Aaron just said. When I think about, like what this needs to look like moving forward, what accountability, I'm going to start there with the accountability piece. It wasn't just racist or folks who are afraid, or folks who are in denial about racism, or that they may be racist. As far as, in my opinion, who voted, I think folks voted for their privilege. That there were some progressives that voted for Trump. That there were folks who were on our side who voted for Trump because possibly of the kind of economic padding that they were hoping, was going to kind of come with that. It wasn't just conservative Christian white women who went and voted for Trump. And I think that, when we start talking about accountability, then that accountability begins with transparency and honesty, and really, and for, on the inside of our collective movements, what this really needs to look like as far as, kind of white folks talking to white folks and really kind of coming to an understanding about what privilege really is, what privilege really looks like, and, what's the steps that folks are taking to preserve it. So when I think about accountability, I think about that. Accountability strikes me like, what is the responsibility of our mainstream movement? What will be the, what responsibilities do they have? And then when I just kind of start thinking about, what we're doing, we're just going to continue doing what we were already doing. We were in the community. We're going to stay in the community. We need to amp that up. Obviously, our groundwork needs to be even more, intensified, which for us also means, more funding. So when I think about, what this work looks like, what the work looks like for us moving forward, it looks like we need more money. That's what it looks like. It looks like Black women in particular need more money. Black and brown people who are out here, doing the work in human rights on all levels, in all areas of human rights, really need resources because, I just imagine what could have happened if SisterReach could have been in the community since March, knocking on doors, doing voter education and talking to voters. Imagine what would have happened then. So I just think about, for us, our work definitely looks like buckling down even harder on our civic engagement and talking to voters, making sure that folks can get to the polls. Our work is making sure that the 2018 elections are not a fail. This is where we lost in the first place. We could talk about Trump right now if we want to, but he wouldn't be there if it were not for the Electoral College. And the Electoral College would not have been in his favor had our people gotten out and voted in primary elections. And so for us, the voter education piece is even more important now when I think about, kind of what our movement's called lower propensity voters, which by these statistics are no longer the low propensity voters. But, by this data, we've got to get our folks to vote in these local elections at the primary level. We've got to shift the way this looks as far as the Senate, and as far as these Senate seats, and the House. We've got to. There's no way to do this, or we're about to be a supermajority Republican country. Which for me, we might as well say New World Order then, because then, we're talking about a mindset. I'm thinking about, RFRA legislation. I'm thinking about, Hobby Lobby. I'm thinking about, the ways that conservatives have very strategically come into position, won seats that, folks just weren't showing up at the polls to vote for. I think about Amendment 1 here in Tennessee and how, we basically lost that because rural voters really came out in record numbers and they voted. And I'm talking about rural votes. We no longer can not be serious about rural voters anymore, especially in southern states where we saw during Amendment 1 in 2014, which was the law that would have that took the privacy component out of the Tennessee state constitution, around abortion. And so, if we were to ever lose Roe, then that meant that Tennessee could then make abortion illegal here in our state. So, when I think about what our work looks like making sure people understand that they no longer have the luxury to sit at home when it's time to vote for city council, and when it's time to vote for the mayor, and when it's time to vote, for who's going to be your state representative. You can no longer, kind of look at that as the throwaway election and everybody shows up for the presidential election. I think that half of the reason that people didn't understand and some folks didn't show is because we still have, voter ignorance out here. There's a lot of people who don't understand the political process. They do not understand, where the power actually lies. And so, SisterReach will continue. We will continue doing voter education. We will continue doing ComSex Ed. I mean, we've been fighting for ComSex Ed now since 2012. Looking at what does this mean now? For abstinence-based education to get resources that the Obama administration, took away for abstinence-based, so that those resources could go where they really needed to go in order to get these STI rates and unplanned pregnancy rates down. So really they've shot themselves in the foot, to be honest. I mean, I don't understand what, they're trying to make this the perfect world or the perfect country, quote unquote, making it great again. If great means ignorant country, then okay, so we're going to keep doing what we've been doing. We're going to keep doing our voter education. We're going to, we've got to amp up working with our churches even more. We've got to make sure that we can bring sexual health education that is comprehensive to young people and their parents. Yeah, I mean, I just, when I think about, I've been getting that question a lot, and the only thing the first way that I've always answered that is, then we need a bigger check, because we've got to be able to mobilize in a far greater capacity than we ever have before. We've got to have full capacity staff all the way across the board. We no longer can have part-time staffers. We no longer can have fourth-time staffers and existing with volunteers and interns, for God's sake. It's time, can we really invest, in, folks who have already demonstrated. We've demonstrated that and I'm saying we as in women of color, we've already demonstrated that we can move our population, that we know how to talk to our population, that we know, that we are in tune with our population. That's why all year we were saying, hey, Black folks are split down the middle on this. What are we doing? We kept saying it over and over and over again. Maybe, because it's a grassroots voice, it's not a big enough voice. Maybe it has to be a national level voice for it to be heard. But we're the ones on the ground, and we're the ones working with folks every day. And we've been hearing this for quite some time. So I'm going around about and making it a longer answer, but yeah, we're just going to, buckle down even more. And what I can only hope is that our funding community understands how important it is to get behind what I'm saying, to get behind people of color-led organizations and organizations that are working with marginalized populations. It's no longer, we no longer have the luxury to play games anymore. And I too I'm very afraid, and I'm very concerned about undocumented folks in this country. What is about to happen. I'm very concerned about Arab Americans, Muslims. I'm very concerned about, folks just feeling like just because they feel like they might have won an election that, the war is won. The war is not won. I'm concerned for, our Native and Indigenous sisters and brothers out here fighting with the DAPL situation. I'm concerned, but even that is a telltale sign, that America does not necessarily respect the people who built this country, the folks whose country this was once upon a time. We don't seem to care about poor people. I'm looking for the next candidate who will no longer silence or invisibilize the poor people and just talk about the middle and upper class. It's time to start talking about poor people, right? And we're going to have to talk about poor people even more, because depending on what our future administration is about to do, rich people are about to be poor. Welcome, you know. So yeah, I'm quite triggered still. I'm quite passionate and emotional still about what this could possibly look like. And I don't have any assurance. I don't care if President Obama held his hand for the next 4 years that we're going to be okay. I just don't feel, like we are safe anymore in this country.
Yeah, thank you for that. Erin, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. So I so appreciate everything that Cherisse just said, and want to echo and support her call to give more money to organizations led by people of color. I was also really, I latched on to Cherisse talking quite a bit about poor people, and we need to aggressively dismantle this idea that the issue is, quote, the white working class voter, unquote, who needs to be reached, which is it's a really problematic idea that the working class is somehow white. That's erasure of a whole lot of people. In terms of accountability, going back to your question, Pamela, about like, what does accountability look like? So, there's a number of areas. As I said earlier, speaking as a white person to my fellow white people, it's important not to deny and minimize what's happening. But what does accountability look like for bad actors? So we know that the federal balance of power has shifted, and now the federal government echoes and mirrors what's happening in red states and has been happening in red states around the country for a long time. What we need to do is make it extremely painful for these bad actors to pursue their hateful work. And in specific, we should not be, one thing, for example, let's not be apologizing for abortion as they eviscerate abortion rights. We know that that's coming. We know that there's going to be attempts to defund Planned Parenthood, possibly even almost immediately when Congress comes back in session, possibly through the reconciliation process. We know that we're going to have Supreme Court nominees that would dramatically shift the way that our country is run for generations to come. We know that Trump has put forward Tom Price for Health and Human Services. Tom Price is extremely opposed to the Affordable Care Act, is opposed to birth control, abortion. And we know that they're going to do this work, so we should make it hard for them. So we should take aggressive action and use direct action. Direct action is something that it's think of it like a pyramid, right, or a scale. You start with education, you move to persuasion and lobbying, and direct action is ideally the action that you take when all other options have been exhausted. We're clearly going to be there more and more in this case where lobbying is not going to work. So, at the end of the day, what we have is our bodies, and we can put our bodies on the line for people for whom it's safe to do so at the moment. Another thing about political change, as someone who lives in Virginia, I have to say that I'm both excited and awed by the responsibility as someone who lives in Virginia that we're going to have elections, the first round of elections, because we're off cycle with everyone else, for what could be the first referendum on a Trump America. So I think it's very important for people to invest in elections at the local level, wherever you are, whether you're on my Virginia cycle or on in 2018. And then one other thing I just briefly like to say about accountability: now is not the time to start waxing like Bernie Sanders and some have about how we need to end a focus on identity politics. This is not a good time to be doing a blame game within the left about what happened. We really need to focus primarily on the crisis, that there are people who are directly impacted and in danger, and focus on doing everything we can to resist the Trump agenda. But yes, we also need to make sure that one of the outcomes it seems that some would like for the left out of this is that we stop talking and championing diversity and progress toward racial equality and gender equality, and that is just not a good approach.
Here, 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 and just to expand on that a little bit, in something that Cherisse had mentioned as well, which is that there's been a lot of talk about supporting Black leadership, and particularly in progressive organizations, supporting the leadership of women of color. The time is past, and it's definitely come to actually do that work. And there's a certain, just for lack of a better word, there's a certain smugness about a lot of progressive spaces that we've discussed a lot, both in webinars and not, that the work of dealing with oppression and racism and sexism is something that conservatives have to do. And it's, we have a reckoning that we're going to have to accelerate within the left to address that on the left side of the aisle as well, and within progressive spaces, because my liberation as a Black woman is not sourced in white wokeness, and I think it's important that folks are be prepared to, and then do the work of supporting women in leadership, women of color in leadership, and then the expanded definition of what we like to call marginalized communities. The people who are about to have a boot on their neck are the people who need to be leading and listened to, and really direct this, because I think we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years kind of what happens when that's a talking point but not an action item. And I think we've moved into a new space where we are at crisis. We are going to start seeing things, particularly in states like Missouri and Tennessee, where we have overwhelming majorities, like they ran the table. We're going to start seeing things that we have not seen in this country for quite some time. And we need to go ahead and use this opportunity to, as Aaron said, reject the idea that identity politics is a problem. White supremacy and racism are the problem. And you're either dedicated to fighting that, or you are dedicating to perpetuating the problem. So we have just a few minutes before I want to start answering some of the awesome questions that people have dropped in. So some final thoughts before we get to Q&A. We'll start with you, Cherisse.
Yeah, I definitely love what you said. One of the things that we're doing right now, SisterReach, is we're about to hold now our second white privilege workshop as a reproductive justice organization, where we have contracted an amazing facilitator to hold that space. She is a white woman who is most definitely woke. And so, I definitely will admonish folks to do that in your cities and where you are. It's time to really, and I know that a lot of my colleagues say, hey, it's not our job to, help folks figure out their stuff. But however, I'm concerned about what's happening here in my state, and I'm concerned because we need one another, and we need one another's social, political, financial capitals, right? And we don't necessarily have the luxury to do a whole lot of things in silo anymore. And so, so we're committed to making sure that those changes happen. So I'm definitely committing as a Black woman running a reproductive justice organization, putting our own resources behind this. And I would advise others across the country, both people of color-led and white-led organizations, to do the same, to provide space for white community members, not just activists, but community members as well, to participate in these types of conversations.
Excellent. Erin, you have anything to add before we get to Q&A?
I'm fully committed and just echo Cherisse's call and am currently working with white women on working on some issues within feminism, specifically within white women. And I think it's very important that white people take on this work.
Thank you for that. We've moved into the Q&A portion of this webinar. And if you do have questions, please drop them into the question. Ooh, did I skip, Erin? Did I break our agenda? Sorry. Okay.
It's so cool. Do you want me to do this quick and then we can use all the time for questions so we don't have to cut off? Is that okay?
Yeah,
cool.
Thank you.
So this is a shameless plug for the organization. Please sign up for alerts at www.reproaction.org. If you haven't checked out our amazing work in Missouri that Pamela is leading at showmerj.org, you are missing out and you should go over there. Also, check out our Who is Closing Abortion Clinics campaign at whoisclosingabortionclinics.org and follow us on social media. We're ReproAction on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We also just want you to plug into your calendar now. We will have another Act and Learn webinar next month. We're going to do another Taking Stock webinar. The next one we're going to focus on is When Democrats Hold Power, Lessons for Reproductive Justice Activists from the Obama Years. While we're transitioning into something heinous from that, and we certainly don't want to move away from the Obama years, there are some lessons that we need to take away, both things that worked and things that clearly didn't work for our movement. So we'll dig into that, and hopefully that will hold relevance, and we'll get these folks out of office, and we'll be dealing with that reality again. And with that, I'll pass it to Pamela for Q&A. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you. So sorry that I jumped ahead of our agenda. All right, Q&A. So we've got awesome questions, which is probably why I got super excited. So the first question is from Chris, Chris agrees that white people need to be able to talk to other white people to dispel misconceptions and show people how dangerous Trump and his cabinet picks are. And Chris would like talking points to help with this. So I think Cherisse kind of touched on the work that SisterReach is doing on this, and I know that Erin has been working, within, more white spaces to on this issue as well. So is this something that would be widely available, Cherisse, or that there might be, some message guidance or some resources made available?
Well, we've actually been tossing around what a white privilege webinar needed to look like, and the facilitator was a little concerned that folks would kind of miss the healing pieces that I think that are also important. So to kind of answer that question, there's really no quick talking points to reconciling a culture of white supremacy. And so for me, I would, I'm excited that you're interested in doing that. I would just say, that be ready for the kind of long haul piece of this, right? The time that it could possibly take. But I'm definitely open to suggestions on how we could make that webinar a little bit more, maybe a Google Hangout of sorts, a little bit more personal. And I'd be happy to share her with the country if she's willing, right, to work with folks, and or we're also open to bringing her to you. So just talk, just reach out. That we would definitely need to sit down and have a conversation with her. But I definitely think that she would be open to that. She's amazing and absolutely committed to fighting racism from the inside out.
Fantastic. And I just take this moment to say that if you want to contact Cherisse, you can visit sisterreach.org online, and her contact information is listed, I believe, under the staff listing, and you could, continue that conversation. But thank you so much for that, Cherisse. So the next question is from Storm. Agree with everything, but encountered a lot of male privilege in men of color while canvassing this year. Do you want you want to just share some reflections, or if that was your experience as well, Cherisse?
Well, I mean, the data also shows, right, that, Black men in particular, 13% also voted for Trump, right? And so we are going to have to deal with the kind of sexism aspect of this. Did Hillary Clinton lose votes from men, and then men of color in particular, just because of her gender? Possibly, right? But, I mean, I don't know that I have any kind of tips on how to combat it, as much as, yes, you are absolutely right. Yes, we've been experiencing it as well. Yeah, and I mean, and misogyny exists, and we're gonna have to figure it out, right? We're gonna have to figure out what we can do. But for me, I'm really concerned about, this kind of out and out hate towards women. The same women that if it were not for our vaginas, like, the men wouldn't be here. What's that about? So yeah, I feel you, and I don't, I don't necessarily have an answer, but I can say that yes, we've been experiencing it as well.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. So the next question that we have this is a good one from Jamie. What's the next big anti-choice issue coming down the pipeline? Jamie says that the state has already passed unconstitutional 20-week and D&E bans and loves trying to chip away more and more at choice each session. So I'll take a first stab at that, and then I'll pass it along, saying that as a Missourian, abortion is the most regulated medical procedure in the state of Missouri, and I definitely think that what we are potentially facing is even more and more restrictions that would either set up a challenge to Roe, which is one path that some parts of the anti-abortion movement want to take, and then the other path is that there are people who just want to restrict it until it is a right in name only, because they enjoy mobilizing voters around it. So I actually predict that the first session in a lot of states that have supermajorities like Missouri is going to be a little bit of a war between these two factions to figure out what they want to do. But I definitely think that we're going to see some really theatrical, fantastical stuff, and then we're going to see the first round of how the opposition tries to legislate its way around the recent SCOTUS ruling on TRAP. And Erin, do you have thoughts?
Everything you said, and they're clearly going to overreach and get greedy, and the incrementalists, the people who are doing the 20-week bans, are going to come up against the people doing the 6-week bans, and the people trying to outlaw abortion outright because they expect a favorable Supreme Court for their anti-human rights agenda. Just one thing that I think that we're likely to see a lot more of is criminalization of abortion and people who have abortions. It's already happening and has been happening for a long time. But the logical consequence of making abortion illegal is throwing women in jail. And I think we're going to see more and more of that.
Thank you. And Cherisse, you get to have the final thoughts of the webinar.
Yeah, I definitely echo the piece around criminalization around abortion. Just did an interview today about self-induced abortion, thinking about the Antioch case here in Tennessee. So I would say let's look out for more self-induced abortion-esque type legislation. But something else that I want us to kind of move away just from abortion, I want us to look at some other things too. I want us to look at the influx of support around long-acting reversible contraception by conservatives, because even here in the state of Tennessee, as of January 1 of this year, our managed care folks have allowed even undocumented women to receive a LARC up into 6 weeks postpartum, 6 weeks after delivery. delivering her baby. So I do think that there's going to be kind of a swell in access to long-acting reversible contraception, and I know that that's kind of talking against maybe what folks are feeling, because I think that folks are concerned about getting LARCs now before we lose ACA, but we're not going to lose ACA like tomorrow if we lose it. And so I do want people to be kind of mindful, but I want them to be mindful about the coercion that's about to go down. And long-acting reversible contraception is absolutely a part of that, for sure.
Thank you so much. I just want to say on behalf of the attendees and Erin that we just appreciate you so much, Cherisse. If you are not familiar with the work that SisterReach does, please check out sisterreach.org. It is a tremendous organization, and we are so proud to have you on our advisory council and to stand with you in this movement. So thank you so much for your time tonight, Cherisse, and thank you to everybody who attended. And we are very proud of being prompt. So it's 7 Central, 8 Eastern, and we are wrapping up. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.